Vi befinner oss 55 meter ovanför staden Trelleborg som också lånat sitt namn till Trelleborg AB. Ett storföretag som bidragit till att sätta Sverige på hjul och i hög grad blivit synonymt med begreppet gummi. Och ända sedan 1905 har Trelleborg AB försett svenskarna med allt från gummidäck till regnkappor. Och under 2 världskrig, när Sverige var isolerat och avspärrat, levererades livsviktig materiel till det svenska försvaret.
Today, Trelleborg AB has grown into a global industrial group and is one of the world's largest producers of industrial rubber. The head office is in Trelleborg, while production takes place in hundreds of plants worldwide. 90% of total sales occur outside Sweden.
Koncernen, som i år omsätter cirka 22,5 miljarder kronor, har idag 21 000 anställda i ett 40-tal olika länder. Men hur började det?
A Spanish report from South America in 1530 describes a substance the author of the letter calls Gomma optima. It was latex, a form of resin with remarkable properties. The Indians used the rubber in religious ceremonies and to make quivers for their arrows, rain hats, and balls. In Europe, during the 18th century, interest in the strange substance began to grow. One of the pioneers in Sweden was Emanuel Nobel, Alfred Nobel's father, who produced rain clothes for a period during the 1830s. But the major breakthrough came in the US. In 1839, Charles Goodyear achieved what the Spaniards had already dreamed of achieving 400 years earlier. A process for transforming raw rubber into an elastic, shape-retaining material. The process, later to be called vulcanizing, involved adding sulfur and heating the material. In the UK in 1888, veterinarian J.B. Dunlop developed the pneumatic rubber tire for cycles, an invention that, in combination with improved ball bearings, transformed the bicycle at one stroke into an efficient means of transport for millions of people. And as early as 1914, the Germans began developing synthetic rubber. The first rubber product to be mass-produced was galoshes, which would later be sold in enormous numbers in Northern Europe. The next major volume product was in an entirely different category, the pneumatic bicycle tire. And to satisfy the need for galoshes and bicycle tires in particular, as well as belts, hoses and seals, collectively known as industrial rubber, rubber companies were being started up one after the other in continental Europe and in Sweden. The year was 1896. Sweden was in the midst of a dizzyingly rapid transformation. In the industrial city of Malmö, 4 gentlemen met at the Kramer Hotel on Saturday the 10th of October. One of them was the well-known merchant Johann Koch from Trelleborg. The purpose of the meeting was to discuss starting up a rubber production plant to manufacture and sell bicycle tires and various industrial rubber products. The result of the meeting at the Kramer Hotel was the foundation of AB Velox, which constructed a rubber production plant in Trelleborg the following year on land acquired by Velox from Johann Koch. Production was soon in full swing. Although sales of industrial rubber went well, the complicated production of bicycle tires became a failure. After signing an agreement with Dunlop in 1899, The company changed its production methods, leading to improved results. But competition was intense, and Velox's earnings trend was lamentable. Velox's main competitor was Helsingborgs Gummifabrik, founded in 1890 and presided over by the dynamic young Henry Duncker. The Helsingborg plant mainly produced galoshes, but also bicycle tires and industrial rubber.
I början av 1905 är inte bara den svensk-norska unionen i upplösning. Även Velox håller på att gå samma öde till mötes. Aktiekapitalet är förbrukat och företaget bör upplösas, anser Velox revisorer. Ägarna med trelleborgaren Johan Kock i spetsen har all anledning att vara bekymrade. Det är nu Henry Duncker gör entré.
Han var oerhört beslutskraftig och han var en man som liksom han fick respekt för helt naturligt på grund av hans natur, alltså människa. En dominerande person. När han kom in i ett rum så fyllde han upp rummet.
At this time, Henry Duncker was 35 years old and a veteran of the youthful Swedish rubber industry. When Duncker also experienced difficulties with the competition, he tried for several years to merge the Swedish rubber companies and tighten up the structure of the industry. Up to this point, his efforts had not been successful. But when Velox's problems became acute, he acted rapidly.
Henry Duncker tar nu kontakt med den hårt trängde Johan Kock och föreslår honom att de tillsammans ska bilda ett helt nytt bolag. Förhandlingarna börjar bra och Johan Kock lägger till och med bort titlarna med den yngre Henry Duncker. Ett stort steg på denna tiden. Men Henry Duncker visar ingen som helst tacksamhet inför en så storslagen gest. Han kräver istället att få majoritet i det nya bolaget, vilket gör Johan Kock så upprörd att han tar tillbaka titelbortläggningen och lämnar mötet. Men Johan Kocks handlingsfrihet är mycket begränsad och han inser snart att det är Duncker som har alla trumf på hand. Förhandlingarna återupptas igen.
On October 30th, 1905, Trelleborgs Gummifabrik AB was formed, with Henry Duncker holding 51% of the shares and assuming the roles of plant manager and president of the new company. There was no question that it was Henry Duncker who called the tune, and his ambitions were also clear from the second paragraph of the Articles of Association. The purpose of the company's operations shall be to manufacture and sell rubber products with the exception of galoshes and shoes. AB Velox's assets and liabilities, plus the Helsingborgs plant's production of bicycle tires and industrial rubber, were now transferred to the new company. The Helsingborg plant would only produce galoshes. The first major structural maneuver in the Swedish rubber industry had been completed. Under Henry Duncker's firm leadership, Trelleborg rapidly grew to become Scandinavia's leading rubber company. Already after the second year of operations, sales had increased to 1.2 million Swedish krona, and the number of employees had risen to 176. As the successful trend continued, wages also increased by 27% to 0.38 Swedish krona per hour for the highest paid workers. Free medical care and free medicines were introduced. But working hours were still 60 hours per week, and miners working in production, as was customary at the time, were a common sight. Now demand began to grow for another product, car tires. Automobiles had become an increasingly common sight, and a completely new plant was constructed in Trelleborg in 1907, exclusively to produce car tires. An early customer was no less a personage than Prince Eugene, who on September 26, 1908, purchased a new front tire for his 40-horsepower Benz, to be delivered to Torup Slot near Malmö, where the prince lived temporarily. Also in 1908, the T trademark was introduced as the company's corporate symbol. And 2 years later, it was time for the launch of another product, rubber raincoats, that were to be a high-volume item for many years. And now exports, primarily of industrial rubber products, also got underway. The outbreak of war in 1914 brought a dramatic increase in sales. The Swedish armed forces needed tires, gas protection materials and raincoats. Trelleborg's technicians had to work flat out to meet the requirements for increasingly advanced products. The growing shortage of raw rubber also gave new urgency to the development of new methods for recycling scrap rubber into reclaimed rubber. In 1918, peace was restored and sales of bicycle and car tires once again rose substantially. Demand from abroad was mainly for industrial rubber. In the spring of 1926, a company office was established in London. In the autumn of 1935, the number of employees in Trelleborg exceeded 1,000 people for the first time. Sales were now more than 10 million Swedish krona, and car tires were the largest single product group.
Inom Henry Dunkers ständigt växande gummiimperium är hans övriga företag främst inriktade på galoscher och stövlar. En strategi som medfört att Dunker dominerar denna marknad i Europa. Henry Dunker kallas nu med all rätt för galoschkungen, men för den sakens skull glömmer han inte bort bildäcken. Trelleborg har ju med stor framgång producerat bildäck ända sedan 1907, men Dunker med sin strategiska klarsyn ser vilken oerhörd utveckling som pågår nere på kontinenten och i USA då det gäller utveckling av nya produktionsmetoder, men framför allt framtagning av syntetgummi. Och här är Trelleborg en liten aktör. Och då gäller det inte längre dominansstrategier utan samverkan. Och så får det bli. I januari 1939 inleds ett tekniskt och kommersiellt samarbete med den amerikanske däcksjätten BF Goodrich.
Another event of great significance occurred during the same year. After holding the post of president since the company's founding in 1905, Henry Dunker, who was nearly 70, recruited a successor. His choice was as bold as it was important. The person chosen was 46-year-old Hilding Stolbrandt, who commenced his duties in May 1939. The new president had no experience of the industry, having previously worked at Mazzetti Chokladfabrik and Sockerbolaget. Hence his nickname of Sugar Boiler at his new workplace. But Henry Dunker knew what he was looking for, a modern corporate manager with experience of other markets. With a new president in place and access to American technology, Henry Dunker decided to build a large new car tire plant in Trelleborg. But other events intervened. On August 1, 1939, Hitler invaded Poland.
Kriget innebär omedelbar omställning till försvarsproduktion, men också en kraftig efterfrågeökning. Trots råvarubrist och ransoneringar måste försvarets kvalificerade behov tillgodoses. Något som också lyckas tack vare nya avancerade metoder för användande av regenerat.
But a small number of vitally important products, such as bulletproof fuel tanks and seals for aircraft engines, required oil-resistant synthetic rubber, which could only be purchased from Germany, an import that proceeded with the consent of the Swedish authorities. These transactions also provided an excellent insight into the German war industry, which was now being subjected to increasingly heavy air raids. As a result, The Trelleborg management realized as early as autumn 1944 that the supply chain for German industry was desperate and that Germany would lose the war. For Trelleborg, the arrival of peace in 1945 ushered in a new period of strong growth and rapid internationalization. In the war-torn Europe that now had to be rebuilt, demand for rubber products was strong, and Trelleborg, with its undamaged production apparatus, was able to obtain high prices. Moreover, the war had brought a strong increase in technical know-how, and inquiries about advanced new products were received from the defense industry in particular. Saab, for example, purchased nose cones made from the new material plastic for military aircraft. Hilding Stålbrant died suddenly in 1949, and his son, Åke, who had been employed as an assistant to his father, was appointed as the new president. Henry Duncker had once again made a wise choice. Åke Stålbrant would contribute to Trelleborg's continued success after the war through such measures as increasing the focus on exports and breaking the dominance of the technicians within the company. Henry Duncker was now 80 years old. As chairman of the board of directors, he had total control of operations. And since the company was doing so well, he gave management considerable freedom of action.
Han hade ju ett otroligt förtroende för Åke och för mig. Han var så snabb i allting och snabb i beslut. Det blev inga långdragningar. Så när vi till exempel skulle bygga ut vår bilringsfabrik i början på mitten på 50-talet var det väl. Så då fick vi lov att dra det här ärendet för Duncker. Då frågade han systematiskt: har ni en bra produkt? Har ni en marknad för produkten? Har ni folk som kan sköta det här? Har ni pengar som ni kan finansiera det? Och när vi hade dragit det här och försäkrat att vi kunde klara allt det där, så sa han: sätt igång. Det tog 4,5 minut. Och då var det ett beslut som motsvarade en investering som var dubbla aktiekapitalet.
Trelleborg, Trelleborg. Trelleborg, Sassnitz.
Och Trelleborgs gummifabrik. Verket bakom märket. Idag en av världens modernaste fabriker. Svensk initiativ, svensk arbete, svensk produktion av praktiskt taget alla slags gummiartiklar.
By the last year of the war, 1945, sales were already up to 30 million Swedish krona. 10 years later, they passed the 100 million mark. And in 1960, the company had sales of 200 million Swedish krona. The main products continued to be tires, industrial rubber and coats.
Det är slag som är svår för här så ska ni förstå akvarell.
Mina damer och herrar, det finns en Aquarex för er också.
But despite the highly successful developments in the tire area, including the launch of a winter tire as early as 1951 and of Europe's first tubeless tire in 1953, Åke Stålbrant was anxious about the major dependence on the automotive industry and the increasingly tough competition. In 1962, the chairman of the board of Trelleborg and the company's principal shareholder, Henry Duncker, died at the age of 92. One of the last great entrepreneurs from the infancy of industrialization had passed on. Henry Duncker had become one of the richest men of the era in Sweden, and left 58 million Swedish krona when he died. Both Koch and Duncker were childless and had bequeathed their fortunes to a number of foundations and funds established in their names. The Duncker and Koch foundations were to continue to dominate Trelleborg, even after its exchange listing in 1964. The company appeared to be strong and well equipped to face the future. But even now, clouds were gathering on the horizon. The first portent of an impending new era came when the marginal, but so far highly profitable, production of bowling balls, together with all production of the popular air mattresses, ceased in 1964. The new plants in the Far East now began to compete in earnest based on low prices. All production of ready-to-wear clothing ceased in 1969, and the focus shifted instead to developing the protective clothing area. But sales of tires, and particularly industrial rubber, were increasing, and sales reached a record high of 500 million Swedish krona in 1969, with an export portion of 25%. Little could the now 6,500 employees guess what enormous changes awaited them in the near future. As early as 1949, Michelin in France had launched a totally new tire design known as the radial tire, with twice the lifetime of the earlier diagonal tires. After heavy investment in new production technology, all of the major tire producers gradually began producing their own radial tires, including Trelleborg, which launched its T-belt radial tire in 1964, while continuing with production of diagonal tires. A massive overproduction now arose among the world's tire producers, leading to pressure on prices. Trelleborg's problems were further exacerbated by severe conflicts in the Swedish labour market in the early 1970s, resulting in sharp wage increases, which in turn caused high inflation and a fall in the exchange rate for the Swedish krona. Tires are a wage-intensive product, and the situation soon became untenable for Trelleborg. All production of car tires ceased. Assembly machinery was sold. In 1974, the board of directors decided that all production of car, truck and bicycle tires would cease. The decision led to a gradual winding down of production in these areas, while resources were increasingly devoted to heavy special tires and industrial rubber, accompanied by increased internationalization. The closures in tire production affected some 1,000 employees. Trelleborg was now operating at a loss for the first time since 1922. At the same time, a new president took up his post. This was Arne Lundqvist, former president of IBM in Sweden, who succeeded Åke Stålbrant in 1976, when the latter became chairman of the board of directors. The following year, 72 years of cooperation with Henry Duncker's company Tretorn in Helsingborg came to an end. A year later, the historic plant closed for good, another victim of low-price imports.
I Trelleborg jobbar man vidare och 1979 visar bolaget åter en blygsam vinst. Resten är nutidshistoria, om än en spännande och dramatisk sådan. Och även om 80- och 90-talet periodvis innebar halsbrytande avsteg från huvudaffären, så skapade den våldsamma expansionen nödvändiga resurser för att återlyfta det anrika gamla gummiföretaget till nya höjder.
The company's core expertise is now once again based on polymer technology, meaning the development and production of advanced rubber and plastic products. Trelleborg's customers are located throughout the world, in sectors such as the automotive industry, offshore, and the construction, aviation, and process industries. The company's products include anti-vibration components, special tires, seals and hoses, fenders, as well as products for sealing profiles and waterproofing. There can be no doubt that Henry Duncker would have been well pleased with today's official description of what has become of the company that was once popularly known as the rubber production plant. And he would also have noted with satisfaction that Trelleborg's products continue to damp, seal and protect, albeit in many more places and under far more varied conditions than ever before.
Cirkeln har slutits och Trelleborg bygger vidare, om en i modernare tappning, på den verksamhet som Henry Duncker en gång slog fast i den ursprungliga bolagsordningen från den 24 augusti 1905. Bolaget ska ha till föremål att bedriva tillverkning och försäljning av gummivaror med undantag av galoscher och skodon.